September 8, 2025, a tow yard in Los Angeles. Workers there noticed something coming from a Tesla that had recently been impounded. A smell. Not oil or rubber or exhaust. Something that stops you in your tracks. Something that doesn't belong in a place like that. Flies were gathering around the vehicle. Workers kept their distance. The tow yard manager picked up the phone and called the Los Angeles Police Department. Welcome to Dark Crimes, where we focus on the facts, the evidence, and the stories behind the case. When LAPD detectives arrived at the scene, they opened the front storage compartment of the Tesla, the section sometimes called the frunk. What they found inside was a black cadaver bag covered in insects. Inside the bag were severely decomposed human remains, a head and a torso. Beneath the cadaver bag, detectives discovered separate garbage bags. Inside those were dismembered arms and legs. 2 fingers from the victim's left hand had been amputated. They have never been recovered. At this point, investigators had no idea who these remains belonged to, but they quickly established one thing. The Tesla was registered to a 20-year-old musician from Houston, Texas. His legal name was David Anthony Burke. His stage name was D4VD. By the autumn of 2025, David was one of the fastest rising young artists in the world. Millions of listeners had discovered him through TikTok and streaming platforms. He had recently released his debut full-length album, Withered, and was in the middle of a world tour that had taken him across continents. His music spoke of longing and heartbreak. His fan base was young and devoted. His future, by every measure, seemed limitless. And he was now the registered owner of a vehicle containing dismembered human remains. 8 days after the discovery, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner made a positive identification through dental records. The remains belonged to Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez. She was 14 years old. To understand this case fully, you need to understand who Celeste was, not just as a victim, as a person. Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez was born on September 7, 2010, just 1 day before the workers at that tow yard would make the discovery that would eventually put her name on front pages across the country. She grew up in Lake Elsinore, a city in Riverside County, about 60 miles southeast of Los Angeles. Her parents had immigrated from El Salvador and built a life there. She had 2 older siblings. She attended Lakeland Village School. She had braces. She had a tattoo on the inside of one of her fingers that read, "Shh." She was, by every account, an ordinary teenager navigating an ordinary life in Southern California. School, family, a neighborhood where people knew her face, a future that was supposed to be wide open. Prosecutors allege that Celeste first met David Burke in early 2022 when she was 11 years old. How that meeting came about has not been fully detailed in public court filings. But what prosecutors allege is that contact continued, that the relationship developed over time, and that by November 2023, when Celeste was 13 years old and Burke was 18, it had become sexual. Text messages, photographs, digital communications, and witness testimony, prosecutors say, help establish that timeline. And on Burke's phone and iCloud account, investigators say they found a significant amount of child sexual abuse material. In February 2024, Celeste's parents reported her missing for the first time. Riverside County Sheriff's detectives followed up on the report and tracked down David Burke. He told them he had only met Celeste once. He told them he did not know she was a minor. He denied any significant relationship with her. Prosecutors say that was a lie. Celeste came home. And when she did, her parents took away her cell phone, a reasonable response from 2 parents who were frightened and trying to keep their daughter safe. According to court documents, Burke's response to that was to drive to Lake Elsinore himself, find a classmate of Celeste's, and pay that classmate $1,000 to hand Celeste a new phone, so that the 2 of them could continue communicating without her family ever knowing. She was 13 years old. She was reported missing again in March 2024, and again in April 2024. 3 times in the space of a few months, her parents contacted the Riverside County Sheriff's Department because their daughter had disappeared. 3 times they were left without answers. Throughout 2024, prosecutors allege Celeste spent increasing amounts of time at Burke's home in the Hollywood Hills. She wasn't just visiting occasionally, she was traveling with him to Las Vegas, to London, to Texas, where she met his family. Text messages recovered by investigators, according to court filings, included references to sex, pregnancy, abortion, and emergency contraception. She was 13, then 14. A child, by any legal and moral definition, who prosecutors say was being groomed, manipulated, and sexually abused by someone who was an adult and who had more power, more money, and far more influence than she did. And all the while, neighbors in Lake Elsinore would sometimes spot her back in the neighborhood, out with her parents, looking from the outside like everything was okay. By early 2025, David Burke's career was at a turning point. His debut album, Withered, was days away from release. A major world tour, the Withered World Tour, was fully booked. He was generating the kind of momentum that most young artists spend their entire careers chasing. Streaming numbers were climbing. The music industry was paying attention. Behind the scenes, prosecutors allege something else entirely was happening. The relationship between Burke and Celeste was fracturing. Prosecutors say that Celeste, despite everything she had been through, still believed the two of them had a future together. She was jealous of other women in Burke's life. She was frustrated. She felt, perhaps, that after everything, after the secret phone, after the travel, after years of being kept hidden, she deserved more than what she was getting. On the evening of April 22, 2025, the two had a lengthy argument conducted over text message. Prosecutors described it as revealing the victim's jealousy and frustration. And somewhere in the course of that argument, Celeste made a threat. According to the court filing, she told Burke she would, and I'm paraphrasing the document here, disclose damaging information about their relationship to end his career and destroy his life. Think about what that means for a moment. A 14-year-old girl who had been hidden away and kept secret for years, who had been reported missing 3 times, who had been given a secret phone so that no one would find out about her, finally threatening to tell the truth about what had been done to her. She thought the threat might protect her. She thought it might give her leverage. She thought it might finally make him take her seriously. She was wrong. The following evening, April 23, 2025, Uber records show that Celeste was picked up from her home in Lake Elsinore. She was driven to David Burke's residence in the Hollywood Hills. Prosecutors believe that was the last journey she ever took alive. What the prosecution alleges happened inside that home is laid out in their court filing in devastating and precise detail. The filing states, and I want to read this directly because the language matters, knowing he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career as she had threatened. Very soon after her arrival at his home, defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. It continues. At no time did he call law enforcement or 911 or take her to an emergency room to attempt to save her life. The autopsy report, which was signed in December 2025 but sealed at the request of law enforcement and not made public until April 2026, found that Celeste died from multiple penetrating injuries, wounds to her chest and abdomen consistent with sharp force trauma. The decomposition of her body was so severe by the time she was found that examiners could not even determine her eye color. She was 14 years old. She died on the floor of a home in the Hollywood Hills, and according to prosecutors, the person responsible for her death did nothing to help her. He stood there, and he waited for her to bleed out. What prosecutors allege happened in the hours, days, weeks, and months that followed is one of the most disturbing parts of this entire case. Because the killing itself, as horrific as it is, was apparently only the beginning. According to court documents, Burke immediately began trying to conceal what had happened. Not just to avoid suspicion, but to actively construct an alternative reality in which Celeste had simply walked out the door on her own. Late on the night of April 23rd, prosecutors say he sent text messages to Celeste's own phone. He placed calls to her number. He asked in writing where she was. He created a digital paper trail designed to suggest she was still alive, still out there somewhere, unaccounted for in the ordinary way that teenagers sometimes are. He then, according to prosecutors, dismembered her body, using a chainsaw, in his own garage. Forensic investigators from the LAPD's Trace Analysis Unit later found pieces of blue plastic, consistent with the material of an inflatable pool, embedded in the deep cuts on her remains. The implication being that a pool had been used during the process. He placed what was left of Celeste inside his Tesla, and according to data recovered from the vehicle itself, he drove north into Santa Barbara County, to an isolated site off Highway 154 in the hills near Lake Cachuma, roughly 110 miles from his Hollywood Hills home. Prosecutors say he visited that site 3 separate times in the weeks that followed, each time, they believe, to dispose of more evidence, more traces, more of what connected him to what he had done. In January 2026, a Caltrans worker, someone doing routine roadside work, found something at that isolated site off the highway, Celeste's passport. Back at Burke's home in the Hollywood Hills, a series of purchases began arriving. All of them ordered under a fake name, Victoria Mendez. A body bag, heavy-duty garbage bags, cleaning supplies, a blue inflatable pool. These items were delivered to the property in the days following April 24th. Then, on July 7, 2025, roughly 10 weeks after Celeste's alleged death, and 3 weeks before Burke was due to leave Los Angeles for his concert tour, one more delivery arrived at the house under the same fake name. A burn cage, a device made of perforated stainless steel designed to maximize airflow and produce hotter, faster, more thorough fires. All of this, prosecutors allege, was happening while Burke went about his professional life, while he talked to his team, while he prepared for a world tour, while he told friends and business associates who noticed an increasingly concerning smell coming from the Tesla that everything was fine. On April 24th, the morning after Celeste is believed to have died, Burke gave a radio interview promoting his new music. He attended a record release party that evening. On April 25th, Withered was released to the world. For weeks after the body was discovered in September 2025, the LAPD moved carefully and said little publicly. Investigators executed a search warrant at Burke's Hollywood Hills property on September 17th and seized electronic devices, including a computer. A private investigator hired by the property owner later told investigators they had found a burn cage on the premises. Burke's manager terminated the lease shortly after the search, and Burke moved out. Burke retained Blair Burke as his criminal defense attorney, one of the most prominent and experienced defense lawyers in the country, known for representing high-profile clients in the entertainment industry. In early October, LAPD robbery homicide captain Scott Williams stated publicly that no suspect had been identified, citing the undetermined cause of death and ongoing uncertainty about criminal culpability beyond the concealment of the body. The department was being careful, deliberate. By November, the tone had shifted noticeably. LAPD Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton stood before cameras and said that accountability is coming. He said that no one was off the table, including Burke. He also used the briefing to address some of the misinformation that had spread wildly online about the case, clarifying that Celeste's body had not been frozen and had not been decapitated. 2 claims that had circulated on social media without any factual basis. Behind the scenes, something significant was taking shape. In late November, the Los Angeles Times confirmed that an investigative grand jury had been convened to hear evidence in the case. And then, at a hearing in April 2026, lead prosecutor Beth Silverman confirmed for the first time publicly that not 1, but 3 separate grand juries had been convened over the course of the investigation, all for investigative purposes. Witnesses were subpoenaed. Executives from Burke's record label were questioned. A live streamer and friend of Burke's named Neo Langston was arrested in January 2026 for failing to appear before one of the grand juries. He eventually appeared as a witness the following month. The investigation was methodical, expansive, and it was closing in. On April 16, 2026, almost exactly 1 year to the day after Celeste Rivas Hernandez is believed to have died, David Anthony Burke was arrested by the LAPD at a house on Marmont Avenue in Los Angeles. 4 days later, on April 20th, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office formally announced the charges: first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under the age of 14, unlawful mutilation of human remains. The murder charge came with special circumstances that dramatically elevated the severity of the case. Prosecutors alleged murder of a witness, on the basis that Celeste was involved in an investigation into sexual abuse committed by Burke and was killed to prevent her from speaking. They alleged murder for financial gain, that the killing was carried out specifically to protect his music career. And they alleged lying in wait, because Celeste came to his home voluntarily, not knowing what was waiting for her. Prosecutors indicated they are considering seeking the death penalty. Burke appeared in court wearing orange jail clothes. Handcuffs were removed when he sat. He spoke once during the proceedings to say "yes, ma'am" to a procedural question from Superior Court Judge Charlene F. Olmedo. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. His attorney, Blair Burke, addressed the court clearly and without hesitation. "We believe the actual evidence will show David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez," she said, "and he was not the cause of her death." On April 29, 2026, prosecutors filed a detailed court document laying out, for the first time publicly, the full scope of what they say the evidence shows. The defense asked Judge Olmedo to seal the document. She declined. Defense attorney Burke described the filing as one-sided and replete with hearsay, and argued that its public release had the potential to unfairly taint any future jury pool. These are legitimate legal concerns that defense attorneys routinely raise in high-profile cases, and they are worth acknowledging. What the document contains, regardless, is staggering in its scope. Lead prosecutor Beth Silverman, of the Major Crimes Division, described the prosecution's evidence as totaling 40 terabytes of material. 40 terabytes. That includes the full contents of Burke's phone and iCloud accounts, items seized through multiple search warrants executed across the investigation, an enormous volume of forensic material, Uber records, Tesla vehicle data, purchase histories linked to the fake name Victoria Mendez, surveillance footage. DNA evidence, specifically blood discovered inside Burke's garage that was later matched to Celeste through DNA testing, and witness testimony gathered across 3 separate grand jury proceedings. It also includes child sexual abuse imagery, material prosecutors say was found on Burke's own devices, which, Silverman noted in court, cannot be turned over to defense attorneys in the conventional manner given the nature of the content. A preliminary hearing is scheduled to begin on May 26, 2026. It is expected to last approximately 5 days and will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to send the case to trial. The hearing was delayed from an earlier date after Burke's defense team requested more time to review the volume of evidence they had been provided. Burke remains in Los Angeles County Jail. He is being held without bail. Celeste Rivas Hernandez would have turned 15 years old in September 2025. The same month her remains were found in a tow yard in Los Angeles, inside the car of the man she had, by all accounts, believed she had a future with. She had braces. She had a tattoo that said "shh." She had parents who crossed an ocean to build a life in this country, who reported their daughter missing 3 times in the space of a few months because they were trying, desperately and repeatedly, to bring her home. She had a whole life ahead of her. The question of what happened to her, and who is responsible, will now be decided in a courtroom. David Anthony Burke has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense maintains he is innocent and did not cause her death. The case has not yet gone to trial, and no verdict has been reached. But somewhere in Los Angeles County, a family is waiting for answers. And the name Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez deserves to be remembered. Not just as a case number, not just as evidence in a filing, but as a person who was here, who mattered, and who is gone. And before this video ends, I want to extend my deepest condolences to the family and friends of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Behind every case, every headline, and every court document is a real person whose life mattered deeply to the people around them. No matter what happens as this case continues through the court system, a 14-year-old girl lost her life, and the pain left behind for those who loved her is unimaginable. My thoughts are with everyone affected by this tragedy. Thank you for watching.